I was stationed at Faleolo Hospital in the first declaration of the health emergency, and we made Leituala as the measles case hospital, but everything else will come to Faleolo. And all the staff that were manning this hospital is a senior doctor and a junior doctor, and they cannot do the work of looking after both hospitals. So I was very happy to be told to go to Faleolo. Now, Faleolo, when you are ill, the first place to go to, if you're from Falatai or all that area, is to go to Faleolo. Yes. Whether it's measles or not, they turn up there, and then you do the best you can to isolate them and send them down to Leituala. So we had a few cases that came with 2 cases of meningitis or encephalitis due to measles. We send them through to the hospital. And a case of measles developing right in front of our eyes, and we have to send the child. And a case that unfortunately we couldn't save the child. It arrived very, very late. So as the message is going through, we are grateful to our government for calling the health state of emergency, because it sort of makes our job a lot easier, because we are now dealing with the real problem, rather than our resource is very small in the human resource, but with all the help that is arriving, it makes our job a lot easier. One experience I can recall in the day of the shutdown, I was stationed in Sanapu Hospital on Friday, and one of the people that went out to do the injections came to the village of Satawa, and there's a very sick child there, a 5-year-old child, and the day before they've already buried another child in the same family. So the family are grieving, and they were not going to bring this child to the hospital. So fortunately I was there, and we took the IV fluids and the medicine to the family, and we started the resuscitation process and waited for the ambulance. The ambulance arrived, and I managed to convince the mother that this child has to be treated in hospital for her to have a chance. And the mother agreed, and the father too. So we put her in the ambulance. We all came in the ambulance because you're showing concern, and we know that they're grieving. They're very reluctant to bring the child, but we were very, very fortunate to bring. And the child is well. This child is well now, and very, very grateful to the team that went out and found this child and bring it to our attention. So that's a very good example of families or parents. They did not want to bring the child. We found her there, start the treatment there, talking to the mother, and agreed to bring the child. So there's a very good, happy experience.
You were personally very vocal in trying to convince the mothers, the parents, if they bring their child, a sick child, measles, to the hospital. And you were really concerned because some of the parents actually tried to, or even took that child out for traditional medicine treatment. And then when they bring a child later, it was far too late, and they lost their lives. So can you explain some of this type of experience that happened?
The most surprising experience I had is as a father not wanting the child to be injected with a needle, and that was quite surprising. The reason why they are scared of the hospital. Now, when the child is in a state of shock, where they need to be revived, or the only thing that the hospital can do to revive a child like that who's not drinking, very sick, fast breathing, high fever, is to put a needle to inject the fluid to resuscitate the child. And if you have seen this procedure, is one person a nurse or a doctor holding the child down. It's another person trying to find a vein that's collapsed. It's very difficult. And then you have a screaming baby and the parents there witnessing all this. The only thing they want is not to put any needles in their children. They want to take the child out because for 4 Samoa, do not put needles in children. So they witness that trauma, and that makes them reliant to take the child to the hospital, or in this instance anyway, and they would take it out because when this intravenous drip is tissue, we call it tissue, is out of the vein, we have to find another place for another. And it's not a pretty sight. It's quite traumatic for young parents or parents to see that the child suffering when you're trying to put in this needle. But that's where the life-giving medicine and the fluids will make this child have this child a better chance. A lot of chances for this child to make it if we could do that. But unfortunately, we can't do it without putting these needles in.
So there's a need for more and more, perhaps, public awareness and public education for the parents to fully appreciate that the child needs to be injected and needs the needle to be put into the body in order to save that child, especially for a virus like the measles.
Well, as I said in our language, that any Samoan who understands something, it's very easy for them to agree to it. But when they do not, or any person, it doesn't have to be a Samoan, do not understand, it's very difficult to convince them. You know, medical training is not done in Samoan. It's done in English, and maybe English have difficulty trying to communicate. The doctors there communicate with their own patients. Now you imagine we're trained in an English language, and a lot of the medical terms are not in English anyway. To try to explain that in our own language to a Samoan mother or a father, it's very, very challenging. But you know, more and more we're trying to find terms and interpret these things so that we can explain ourselves better. The experience our people have had for centuries and centuries is always the for Samoa, and that experience, the folklore, the history of all these things, make them very comfortable with the for Samoa. And I think the for Samoa explain their version of disease a lot better than we do. I think, you know, and all the various remedies they provide, I think the Samoan, they will listen and understand that language. And they're very very obedient to the four. The four, Talamua, they live amongst the people. They trust this person, and you know, healing powers of however it's interpreted, they will believe that. But when they come to the hospital, like a new hospital ours, it's a new experience for some of these people. It's foreign. It's not in their community. And whatever we do, the baby's going to cry because we put needles in. And I think that's where a lot of them then will refuse to bring the child in. But it's an ongoing challenge. We still have to find ways to communicate with our own people in a language that we can all understand so that they can make informed decisions. And believe me, they will make good decisions if they do understand this.
Yeah, just going back to the frontline experience, the parents who bring a sick child and then they take it out and then bring the child back for. Is there something that stands out that you remember of such an incident where a parent or a mother would bring in a child trying to take it out for traditional treatment and then bring the child back for treatment at the hospital?
A week or two ago, such a mother brought a child in, and when they see things are not going well, when they see in the hospital, oh gosh, it was chaotic, and the suffering these children go through, she wanted to take her child out and verbally abuse the staff, the doctor that was on duty, and took the child home. And then quickly she found out the child was not getting any better. Then she brought the child back to the hospital to ED, and this doctor that she abused was actually on duty. And then they did procedures. It saved the child, putting in IV, and the child basically woke up, and she was most remorseful. She was crying and apologizing, but it could have been the other way. And I think there's a very happy ending when the mother actually understood, and then she apologized. So first was anger and denial of what ought to be done, and then once she realized that she was wrong, and then the child is saved, and she was very apologetic.
Yeah. Yeah. As a very senior medical practitioner, doctor, you're also an administrator at our main hospital at Matalavea. Going forward with regards to how children are treated and brought to the hospital, in the incidents such as this, where the parents still have the legal power over the child to deny them, if I can call it that, to deny them the treatment, how do you see this as a medical doctor going forward so that we can address this in the future?
Thanks for that very important question, because at the end of the day, we need to look at ourselves, our practice, and see how we can improve on our current situation. At the time when I was the clinical director and managed the clinical services of our NHS, we were only able to prosecute one parents for the neglect of their child and own up to it, and then we took the child away from them to another couple. They were loving to have the child. They love to have the child. Now, that is one isolated case, but we look at the policy and our practices. There is nothing concrete on paper to protect the child to the best interest of the child. Is basically the parents and the carer making that decision. I would like to see the aftermath of all this, that something will be done towards the legislation and the policy side to protect the interests of the child, so that it's not being interfered with because of the parent or the doctor's wishes, and whatever is best for the child should be done. I wish we had a law or something like that on the policy side, so that we can then exert some authority over the situation. At the moment we don't, but at the aftermath of all this, if we can work on those policies and those laws to have the child's interests protected in situations like this, I think we'll be all winners from the lessons from this outbreak.
Yeah, of course there will be a lot of lessons going forward, Doctor, but the slogan, the health slogan, as we've known for years, is prevention is better than cure. But now it seems that with the measles, we will now be focusing all the resources, I think it's now upwards to 30 to 40 million US dollars to cure and to treat the disease. So it looks as if that there has been, as you touched upon very briefly on other areas, that has been perhaps gaps in the delivery of our health services here in Samoa.
Yes, we're not going to dwell on gaps and things, but it's clear, the evidence that is there. The immunization rate was too low. It was too low compared to Tonga and Fiji, and those communities are protected. So the lessons there for us is try and see if we can have a law or legislation to make sure that the child is vaccinated, because there's a lot of beliefs out there. It goes against this protective practice. As you rightly pointed out, protection and prevention is clearly far better than trying to cure the complications of these diseases. And the evidence is out there scientifically. It comes from very worthy sources, the WHO and international studies on it. There is clearly this immunizations, vaccinations of the many diseases will save lives. The evidence is out there. We cannot dispute it. Now, in Samoa, the schedule when the child is born is given a BCG injection, which protects the child from TB, tuberculosis. It's given the hepatitis B injection, a series of them to prevent them from hepatitis B. And then we have a triple vaccine for tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis, an oral vaccine for polio. So all that is ongoing, and it's every 3 months, whether 9 months or 1 year, all that is done. And then we start with the MMR, 1, and then 2, and then the third one before they go to school. So that covers our schedule. If we have some sort of legislation or law or something to say the child has to complete all this on paper and show it to, I think school entry has been proposed, I'm all for it. We've learned this lesson. We've got to do it for the sake of our children.
So, going forward, do you think there's a need for perhaps a clinical or a proper investigation and inquiry into all this, so that this will not be repeated, given that 71 people have died so far, but possibly several more would lose their lives? Do you think there's a need for an investigation so that it will give us some guidelines going forward in addressing what has happened?
Well, Lance, there's got to be closure somewhere of what has happened. And I think the grave concern is if we don't learn from our mistakes or what we haven't done so good at. I think only a commission of inquiry, national, it will get into those dark corners, those things that we don't want to talk about. But I think it's best to bring it out in the open. And I think is to, if there's anything to honor the lives of these loved ones, I think is a must. There's no way we can carry on with life without confronting this disaster that we have in front of us. And then from that we can learn from our mistakes. I think it's too early, Lance, to talk about that. The situation is quite inflammatory. Situation is quite brittle, and that will be later, if I could suggest. Then we go to it. But at the moment, we've got to focus and put all our resources, of the very sick ones we have at the moment. And if we can save more of them in those critical wards, then I think we will achieve a lot. And then much later, we will go back and have a look at it.